7. Okay. Guys, we're back in the deconstruction zone. Different set, new people.
Oh, whoa!
Same general vibe.
Oh.
What's up? So we have some new friends with us here today, new friends of the pod. We're going to jump into it. I think JT's got an icebreaker for us, but before we get there, can you guys just introduce like who you are, what you do, and why you matter? Not to Jesus, but to this podcast.
Wow, man. Okay.
What are you bringing to the table,
Right.
actually?
Oh, God.
Really, I feel like we're just set up for failure here. It's fine. So my name is Josh Schaller. I work with Next Gen with all these awesome people. A little
Yeah,
closer.
eat the mic,
No?
yeah.
Oh, there we go. So, no, my name is Josh Schaller. Work here with Next Gen with these awesome people over here. Work mostly with our camping and our children's ministry. And so we're super excited to be able to have this conversation with you guys today. And, you know, for us, like, we're finally coming down off the busy summer season, and, you know, I might sleep every once in a while. It's going to be
Don't
really
lie to
exciting.
yourself.
Really,
It's okay.
I'm pumped for it, man. Like, 2 kids, like, sleep is at a premium, so I'm ready. So, yeah.
I'll go next. What's up? I'm Angel. I work in the Next Gen office too. And for those non-Methodist nerds that we have listening in, so basically think of this as the state level, that we help any UMC in the state of Missouri when it comes to Next Gen, which is kind of children's to student to college age ministry, however we can. And that looks different any given day, but really it's resourcing, equipping, supporting, and just caring for the people working with the next generation across the state of Missouri in that world. So I'm not super important other than that. I just try and do what I can with what I got.
Incorrect.
And we do what we can.
But what do you do here, though? You
Oh,
never said
my
that.
main focus is working with those working in student ministry and college age ministry. And I also help direct a conference called Unite, which is a 6th through 12th grade conference that we have over the summer, where we gather a bunch of UMC students.
Love it. Also, I would like the record to reflect that Lauren is going to hate it that we called it the Next Gen Office Friends. We're in the ministry area here. I'm Mona Candia. I'm the Next Gen Associate Director here. So I get to work with these two and sit in a bunch of meetings and also kind of advocate for how we can better support our churches in doing kids, youth, and college age ministry. So, yeah, that's who we are.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This is a vibe. I will say for our viewers and our listeners, we worked for about 6 months to get all of our schedules aligned to sit down with the Next Gen.
Indeed,
so
yes.
we are very, very, very excited.
Thumbnail.
So thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time and coming in today. So Olympics just wrapped up. I spent the last 2 weeks watching nothing but that. I don't know about you guys, like 3 years, every 3 years and 50 weeks, I do not care about competitive swimming or running or any of these things, but that's my whole personality for 2 weeks every 4 years. But so this is a two-parter question. There are some things that I think, like, I don't know why this is involved in the Olympics. Like, get it out of there. I would get rid of it. So, like, that's one question. Like, what's something you would get rid of? But also, what's something that, like, delusionally you think you could have a shot at competing in at the Olympic level? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll start to give you guys a sec because I've thought about this a little bit. So, like, before we started filming, I said, like, ping pong, get it out of there. Table tennis, a case could be made. But also things like not a fan of, like, there are some things that do require a high level of skill, but like skeet shooting, get it out of there. I don't know. Like, it's whatever. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But I feel like I could really, like, get down with some badminton in the, like, I feel like I could handle that. Like, I feel like I could, because it's a small court. You don't have to be, like, you just have to be quick.
You clearly have not watched badminton.
I've watched badminton.
They hit that thing 80 miles an hour at your face.
What's
It goes
what's
the
it called?
birdie?
What's it called?
The birdie? Shuttlecock?
Shuttlecock.
Yeah.
Dude, it goes like 80 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour within like 2 feet.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
it's nothing.
Yeah, it is a quick acceleration off the racket, but then it slows down.
Yeah.
So again, it's just a delusional thing. Like, if I were to actually try, I would get a healthy dose of reality. But just in my mind, I think, so that's kind of where. All right, but did that give enough time for anybody?
Yeah.
We can just keep going around.
Yeah, let's do it.
For sure, I think we all saw that any of us could do Olympic breakdancing. I think that would be
Correct.
fun.
Yes.
I would for
My
sure.
4-year-old
I could-
Yeah.
I could
Does.
score as
That
highly
was-
as some people that participated this
Yeah.
year.
That was
Yeah.
the best
Uh-huh.
meme of the Australian dancer. It
Oh
was
my
like when your
gosh.
5-year-old comes upstairs like, Dad, watch this.
Check this out.
My wife was watching the videos of it. And
Yeah.
my initial
It's-
thought was like,
Oh.
this looks Olympic level to me.
Yeah.
I was like, so I was like, I think I could do this.
Yes,
for
I love
sure.
it when they put like this TikTok sound of just like a bunch of sneakers
Yeah.
squeaking
Yeah.
over it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if there's
yeah.
someone dancing, I just hear
Yeah.
like squeak, 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 squeak.
So I for sure watching that. I'm like, I think I do that. I actually think, delusional or not, I think if I committed myself for the next 4 years, I could be an Olympic power walker. I'm like pretty sure I could do it.
There was somebody
Yeah.
from my college that went to the Olympics in 2021.
Yeah.
Like didn't do anything, but like
Yeah.
went to the Olympics for power walking. I was like, that's the most
Yeah.
mobab thing I've ever
I
seen
don't
in my
mean
life.
to
but
like be mean to people. Like people have committed themselves to it, and it is a legit sport.
yeah.
But I'm like, I walk pretty fast. People tell me all the
Yeah.
time.
I feel like
I'm
you have to.
I have to
You
be
got the
Olympic
long
level.
legs.
Yeah, I got
Yeah,
it going
right?
for me.
That's because you're always going to the bathroom. So
Yeah,
You gotta
and
get
my
that
knees
stride.
now are
Yeah.
out of running. I can't do that. So
There you go.
power walking, that might be my
Yeah.
new jam. So I don't know.
There you go.
That was absolutely going to be mine. That speed walking, power walking, like oh my gosh, like what are we doing? That was a couple Olympics ago. I don't know what we were thinking with that. That's ridiculous. Yeah, anybody can compete at that one. I mean, delusionally, I feel like I might have been able to. At one point in my life, could have done archery. I feel like that's not too bad. I do think any one of us, if we were allowed to, could have competed on that women's 4x400 team, and the other three would have just taken us to victory because they were,
correct.
holy cow, they were amazing. But yeah, archery, I feel like, take back to like the old camp days when, I feel like I got, was able to get bullseyes and all the things. And now, I mean, again, delusional now, but like absolutely, like that sounds amazing to me.
Really promoting the camping ministry here.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Do any of our camps have archery?
No, I don't think so.
Eagle Lake
So,
does. Yeah.
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 Oh no, it was axe throwing. Never mind.
We've
Oh,
The targets were outside.
we've
Not
we,
with,
yeah.
with toy axes, not with
Yeah,
correct.
very
sharp
fake
ends.
plastic axes.
So-
no children
I'm
were
not trying to get
harmed.
yelled at by
We've-
Nate. I
Yeah.
want us to.
Not Viking style.
We've talked about doing there's this like archery tag game. Have you seen this before?
Oh my
Bow and
gosh.
arrow,
Yeah.
pretty much. That's
It
what
is-
it is.
It's
like
so
marshmallow.
intense.
Arrows with like a big foam marshmallow in it.
Yeah.
So you literally
Yeah.
play tag shooting people with bows and arrows.
So-
and I couldn't get that approved for some reason, but
you
it's
could totally
it's
rent that out.
100%. It's incredible.
I've
Yeah,
done
yeah.
that before, like at
It's
a D now I was doing
awesome.
worship at.
Yeah.
And the whole point with archery is you're supposed to like let it fly and like be really careful. But when you're playing archery tag, it's
Yeah.
just bouncing off
Yeah.
your arm. The bruise I had looked like I was like an abuse victim. It was so horrible. It was awful. But it was so fun. Very
Because
fun.
you're just a little peach.
I am.
Just a little peach that
Thank
bruises
you.
easily.
That's so sweet.
So nice. Okay, so delusionally, I think I could do bouldering. Like, right? You climb all the way up and climb all the way down. Because what I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not. What I've heard is that it's the same. What is that called? Like the same board or same system. So you just have to learn that system.
Like the layout.
Yeah, the layout. Yeah. So, anyways, I think delusionally I could do that. So there's that. And what would I cut out? What's the one? I don't even know. It has like a ball attached to a string, and then they like spin around in a circle.
You're thinking of tetherball. That's
Tether-
not in the Olympics. That's not in there.
I'd be in the Olympics for tetherball.
Hammer
throw.
throw?
It's like
Yeah, that would.
would be very disappointing.
Yeah, I just.
My favorite
yeah.
lesbian.
What'd you say?
Miss Trunchbull's my favorite lesbian that
Oh,
wasn't
Yeah. Of course.
She wasn't out.
outwardly.
She wasn't
Yeah,
out.
her
Yes.
and Miss Honey,
Oh.
not together.
Oh.
Different, very different vibes.
Very
Yeah.
different. Yeah, I love it. Anyways, I would cut that one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Angel. But
No, go for it.
how badass would Olympic tetherball be though? Like if we think about that,
Oh my gosh.
I think that
Or
has
like-
more of an argument.
I would
than
be there.
Breakdancing.
or
in all
or
honesty.
like
Yeah.
why don't we have dodgeball in there? Or
Oh,
like
put
you know
the
what I
youth
mean?
kids in that,
Yeah,
right?
like-
Like, let's go.
They used to do tug of war.
Yeah, bring that back.
Yeah. Why is that
Oh.
not a
Tug of-
thing?
yeah, why is that not in there? Mark?
That's
Sorry.
Maybe a three-legged race.
Oh,
Yeah.
any
Are we
of
talking
the-
about family picnic now?
any
What's
of the
happening
field day-
here?
any of the field day
Potato
games.
sack. Yeah.
Potatoes out, fried
Any
chicken.
of the
Let's
field day
go.
games.
I want to cheer America on to victory for a three-legged race. Is what I
Yeah.
want to do.
Let's do it. Yeah. Is that what we're
Does
doing
that get
after
around
this?
culturally though? Like, does that like, do other cultures?
There's
like,
got to be. There's nothing like a teamwork. You have to be like really in sync with each other.
That's
I
true.
think
Yeah.
It's deeper than just surface level, I fear.
Yeah.
There's some sermon illustration in that, I'm sure.
Yeah. 100%.
I would say, for me, delusionally, I'm not a good swimmer, but what is it? The water polo? Just looks like competitive drowning to me. Like, and like I get anxiety just watching it, like thinking like I am nowhere close to that athletic to make that happen. But that'd be something I'd be willing to dabble in, and I wonder how kids even get into it. Like, what's the water polo system? The pipeline for it.
Yeah. Pipeline of leadership. Let's
Yes.
go.
And so, but yeah, get rid of the breakdancing really didn't do itself any favors. Well, that one individual did not do themselves any favors.
It just seemed like such an odd addition to the Olympic. Like, I don't know. No.
Like the vibe of Olympics.
Yeah, it was just like if you would have asked me a year ago, like they're going to be adding one new event to the Olympics, what do you think it's going to be? Breakdancing would never have entered my mind.
Yeah.
So I mean, delusionally, like I'm a golfer, so like every time like I show up like to play my tee time, like I'm gonna spin this ball on the green, like it's gonna like I'm gonna look like Max Homa out there. No, so like
Totally
maybe like that's the only thing I have that like I can like maybe get down the pipeline on.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, what to cut? I don't know. Ping pong's dope, dude. I don't want to get rid of that.
I want to get into it.
Yeah.
I watch it and it does nothing.
I mean, maybe cut like there's so much wrestling. There's so many different types of wrestling. Like one of them can go, right?
There's two.
There's a whole lot
There's
of them.
freestyle and Greco-Roman.
Okay, well one of them
same
can
with diving.
Roman could go.
Yeah.
Greco, yeah,
Yeah.
Greco.
It wasn't odd. They looked like they
Yeah.
were like.
It's had its time,
dancing.
Well,
right?
It's same with diving. There's so many different diving events.
Yeah.
Like how many times can you jump off of something before
Okay,
it's
yeah.
like
Whoa!
actually-
Whoa!
No, I changed my answer. So there's synchronized swimming with like the team. There's
No,
also
no.
duo synchronized swimming.
It's not synchronized
yes.
anymore. It's artistic swimming.
artistic
Yes.
swimming.
Come on, get on
My
it.
bad. Sorry to all of our
Cut it.
artistic
Cut it.
swimmers.
Cancel him.
Yeah, we can get rid of one of those.
That's literally half of the people that watch this pod.
Yeah.
Is that really our vibe? Oh,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
We do give that.
Apologize.
Off. I'm so sorry to all the listeners. Yeah. But yeah, one of those can go.
Mona had a visceral reaction to getting rid
To
of,
the diving.
getting rid of some diving.
Okay, so here's a
let's
fun
just-
fact about me is that I did one season. Is that what you call it? I'm not
Okay.
sure.
You're
Person.
apparently the diver.
That's how
You're
much you
it.
did it.
You're the diver. You tell us.
I mean, one season, all my friends were on the swim team, and they're like, "Mona, you should do this." And I was like, "I'm not a swimmer, but I could dive. I cannot dive. I am not good at it. I am a 3. I'm an Enneagram 3. I love to be so good at things. My goal was to just not get disqualified at meets. Like that was it. I was so bad at it. So when you say how many times can you jump off the diving board, it's hard.
Apologize. Josh.
To all the divers out there, I apologize for what has been said.
Like to
here today.
apologize.
I
Apologize to the diving community.
I never thought this would be the episode to like take people down. Like,
Olympics, people have opinions.
Yeah, stay tuned. I'll have a
Clearly.
YouTube video after this with the
Clearly.
apology and everything.
That's it,
It'll be great. Yeah, for sure.
That's funny. Well, I would say that what team I'm putting myself on is I'm putting myself on either the women's soccer team
Okay.
or the women's rugby team. Not because I'm good at either of those, but because I'm a really incredible teammate on the bench.
Vibes.
I'm loud,
Yeah.
I'm creative, and I will bring attention, but also I bring the vibe up.
So it's kind of
Like-
like what was Halliburton?
Yeah.
From
Group project.
he
Yeah.
even tweeted about it. Like
Yeah.
that
We
was
will
the best
get-
tweet of the whole Olympics. I'm
We
like,
will have all the
Yeah.
screen time
Yeah.
on our bench. I'll make sure of that.
Yeah. The reaction shots, perfect.
Yes.
They're gonna be incredible. So.
Yes, or tennis, because I really did love challengers, and I promptly bought tennis rackets after that. They're still in my trunk.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep. Well, and what sport I'm nixing? Don't worry, is I'm nixing all men's sports. And
yeah,
thank you.
great.
Would it have
Yeah.
made that?
Feminine phenomenon.
Honestly, it wouldn't have made that much difference in these Olympics
Yeah.
anyway. It
Yeah.
was like what 65% of our medals were women this year. I know,
Literally.
right? Gosh, man.
Thanks, LeBron, for getting us one.
Well, as it is on every episode, when Sadie starts talking about the show Challengers, it's time to make a transition. So, we are going to talk about next gen stuff, right? So you guys all work in the next gen office, work in the world of these ministries, you guys have a much higher like view than we do, not like a better view, but you guys see everything from the 100,000 foot level, but you guys are also boots on the ground. And our podcast largely revolves around topics of deconstruction and individuals that are in that. And we know that Gen Z and likely Gen Alpha and those that are coming up are either in the throes of deconstructing or like they just aren't deconstructing maybe some of the things that we had to in our upbringing. And so it's creating this really interesting cultural climate, I think, around religion and spirituality and the role of the church in that. And so I think for us, we want to learn from you guys as much as we can. I think we'll participate in the conversation, but I don't know, like when you guys think about how deconstruction has impacted college students, high school students, middle school students, and even younger, like what are your guys' initial thoughts on that? Is it a thing that you're concerned about? Is it a thing you're excited about? Like, where do you guys go initially when we talk about that kind of stuff?
I think another category that's not in there that you had missed too is that you have parents who have deconstructed and who have opt out of participating in Christian spaces, right? And these things. And so these kids aren't even growing up with that because their parents are like, we already did that and we're not into it. Or they have deconstructed and they are really careful about the kind of situations that they might put their kids in when it comes to church environments as well. And so I just wanted to add that perspective in there too. I think that's probably two other additional categories of something that we're seeing. But I don't know, you're the youth guy. Do you want to talk about young people deconstructing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it...
You're more than just a youth guy too.
Yeah.
But also you're the youth guy.
I think a lot of it comes from the aspect that for so long, Gen Z especially, right, has seen culture / community at large, and I would lump in the church in there as well, right? Like they've seen these institutions and they've seen how and heard these big talks about Jesus and God's love, and they haven't really like seen it with people's actions, right? I was actually just listening to the pod on the drive up here, and you guys talked about environmental justice not too long ago, which was a cool episode, because that's one of the things, right? Like you have a Gen Z like community that has heard about climate change, that has heard about like how these major corporations have done all this harm, and we're still here as adults twiddling our thumbs, right? And so they're kind of asking themselves, well, what does the scripture have to say regarding this and taking care of, God's creation? The same thing could be said in the world of purity culture, right? And that affects more so the millennials in the conversation, right? Because it was like really and you guys kind of like elder Gen Zs, right?
So we're the same age. I identify as millennial just because I have older siblings. Sadie is like 3 months younger than me, and
I'm pretty Gen Z to the max as far as like what I identify with, but I don't know, like it's a different vibe. Like my style is different, and like I can code switch in with a lot of millennials here, but if this table was full of Gen Z, my the words I'm using would just naturally be different.
Yep. Yeah. So you're like in the border and can go between.
We're like 96, 97. So.
Elder Gen Z. I'm like one of the oldest Gen Z.
Can we also maybe identify age groups? So we have Alpha, who is babies to about 12 years old. And then we have Z, who is about 12, 13 to like 27 there. And then we're now, like all the babies being born now are beta, right?
I think so.
Is that right? Okay.
I don't know if they've officially coined it, but
I think it's 25 is when that officially starts.
Okay, sounds good.
A lot of beta males being born right now. That's all I gotta say.
There you go. Anyways, I just want to identify those. When we talk about Z, we're talking about, I think when we hear, at least this is the vibe I get. When we hear Z, I think a lot of people think, oh, teenagers, but actually they're young adults.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're getting into the point where they're having space in the world and in our communities where they have a voice and they are worthy. I mean, all ages are worthy of having a voice, right? But like in the world standards, they have jobs, they've likely had careers, right? Like all these different things. So they have a stronger voice there.
Yeah.
So
well, and this entire time, right? Like kind of going back to my earlier point, they've seen what the church, big church, right, like has kind of done and said, but they haven't seen it match up to what scripture says, right? They have a wealth of information at their fingertips with the internet and Google, and they see kind of what the church has done as an institution. They're like, you guys are kind of missing it, right? And so I think that's where you start to see way more deconstruction, because it's just not lining up with what their and kind of what their worldview and what their ethics of scripture kind of like starting to shape up as. And so you're just, because of our screw ups and generations before us screw ups, it's kind of a reaction. As I was thinking about the podcast, I remember he was I don't know if he's still is Stanley still Baptist? Andy Stanley?
Yes.
Technically, yeah. He is.
He's Baptist adjacent,
Yeah.
but he once said something along the lines of, we're here and we're griping about deconstruction, and when he says we, like, that's a bad word in certain conservative circles, but he says, but we've given them a faith worth deconstructing, and like the respect that I had for him to go ahead and like own that, of like, we've given them this wishy-washy, crappy little, like, big talk, but no like action behind it. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now with a lot of the younger generation, especially Gen Z, which is finding their voice. And they're finding their voice at much younger ages, too, because it used to be that the church was the platform where they could use their voice in a couple of other areas. They don't need the church as a platform. They've had it since they can access the internet with all the different streaming medias they have.
Although this is a little bit random of a caveat, as though I am excited to see, like, if we're to vision cast of what I hope, like, I'm excited to see Gen Z like stepping up into church leadership, because I think that they have a lot of really great things to say, and I think they're going to say it in a different way. But you're right that, like, they have just social media, the world at your fingertips, but like, I hope that does like permeate into church.
Well, and they have to be given the space
Right.
to, which is a whole other conversation,
Right.
where like we as older generations have to be willing to empower them and give them that space at the table to speak at, because we have done such a shitty job of it.
Yeah. Something like, so I think about that kind of thing all the time, like creating spaces of leadership. Like, one of the things that I remember as when millennials were still considered young, when I was in ministry at 25, coming in, I was a campus pastor at a church, and even before that, in my early 20s, saying like, man, it'd be really interesting if like someone actually gave me like a seat at the table of significance and my voice mattered. And I remember that feeling in my early 20s, and something that we've tried to commit to at the Well is like saying, like, how do we create those kind of spaces, and knowing that it will be like uncomfortable and it will be messy. Like, for me, like, it doesn't mean that it is for everyone else, but that's one of the things that I do think hamstrings the progress of the church and of faith communities, is the threshold of its elder leaders being not having an appetite for being uncomfortable. And it's like, there was someone that was uncomfortable to let me preach for the first time. Someone that was uncomfortable, like, hearing me like just fumble my way through bad theology and push the ball forward in areas that needed to be pushed forward that they weren't ready to go, perhaps. Like, and so I don't know, it is interesting. It's like in your guys' seat, but also in our seat. And like, that's something I've reconciled, like being the leader of a church now, like having to be like, my job actually is not pushing things forward as much as maybe it's creating space for others that's voices aren't heard, whether that's on our board or on our staff or whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting, like as you said that, I think like just creating spaces of leadership is going to be what keeps the church relevant, and if we don't do that, it will likely die, at least as it currently exists.
Well, and creating spaces of leadership is not just hiring a 20s or 30 something on your staff to give them a role for the look of your church, because there are a lot of churches I think still fall into that trap where like, this is our token young person, and then as soon as they, and then they, so as a young person that gets hired on the church staffs, like, then I'm like, okay, well, I'm ready to assert myself into my career, and then I still get the pushback of like, well, you're too young, so you need to take time to learn and grow in this role, which has truths to it. However, at least for like millennials and Gen Z, the way that we want to learn is by doing it and failing. And like, I know that by doing certain things, I'm not going to be perfect at it the first time, and I'm aware that that's because of my age, my inexperience, but like, give me the opportunity to see it, experience the failure for myself, because if I fail, it's not going to crumble the institution just by one thing, unless I mess up really, really badly, which like, so I'm not saying it's an end all be all, but like, that we can't hinder them because they need to grow the way that you think they need to grow. You know, the way that generations are growing now is a different look to what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago when these people, you know, our seasoned pastors, you know, were growing then.
So yes to everything that everybody is saying. One of the things that we brought Mark Matlock in from Barna to talk about the different generations.
Awesome.
He was so good. Yeah. One of the things that he said is millennials generation is the first generation that had something to offer to the world. And nobody knew, like the previous generations didn't know what to do with that. But now we have Gen Z who they also have things like millennials have had to wait to use that. Like we've had to wait, like we've been asking for a seat at the table, but we've had to wait for people to give us a seat at the table versus now Gen Z is like, we already have a seat at, like we have a whole platform
We'll
online.
go make our own table.
Yeah, we're gonna, that's what they say. We're gonna go make our own table. And so I do think that that's an interesting perspective. Part of my story is that I grew up in a church where they just made space for me in every part of my journey as a young person. In 6th grade, they gave me opportunities for leadership. And by high school, I was teaching our preschool, you know, Sunday school class, right? Like all those different things. But I didn't have a seat at the table in influencing what could be. And I think Gen Z and even our younger generations have this perspective around like millennials, we're willing to get into it and say, okay, let's help change the system here. And Gen Z is like, I mean, take us or leave us. We're going to change everything without you, like with or without you. Yeah. And so they have such a good BS meter to be like, nope, you didn't do it. You messed up again. Great. We're going to move on and go do our own thing over here, which I actually think is like really cool. And also we're like, the church could welcome them in and be like, no, help us. But sometimes I think our arrogance and our ego gets in the way as the church and the institution that it is.
And that's a really tricky part, especially for old leadership, to know that you have somebody that young that's more than happy to hold you accountable. And when you've had like this system and this power and this authority all set up, and then all of a sudden you're like, but wait, is that really what we're supposed to be doing? Or is that really on mission? Or is that, and that's where you get a lot of that tension a lot of the time is kind of to what you were saying. It's like, it's handing off the keys, right? Like if you're going to hand off the keys, then truly hand off the keys. Don't just say like, oh, here's this one to the janitor's closet. Have fun, right? Like it's so.
Here's
so
our Instagram page.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Fix
this
it.
for us. Yeah.
Fix it.
Make us relevant to your people.
Can you help our computer, please? How do we get this?
Right. Have you tried turning it off and back on? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. So I mean, all this is just, it's interesting because I think just the generational divide that we get in our churches it seems to be widening in a lot of ways. Because I mean, to your point, millennials, we kind of grew into having technology. I think I can still do the modem noise from memory. If anybody knows what that is.
Do it right now.
Do it.
Do it.
We don't have time for that. It's fine. Okay. All right. All right. Good. So yeah, this is one of the first times I've had the microphone. Yeah, this will be it. This is what we'll leave people with. It was hold on. Just That's it.
This is the quality that the people came for.
Intro.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the intro.
So welcome for, again, the 12
Clip
people
that.
that know what that is. It's fine. It's great. But honestly, you can check it. I think that's pretty accurate, honestly. But Gen Z growing up with technology, and that is just a part of their lives, it's made it to where I think in a lot of our churches that we've talked to, we have pastors, we have leadership at the church that, are thinking like, hey, we need to get younger, but at the same time are saying, we have no idea how to talk to these people. I hear that a lot in our churches. I don't even know where to start. Like, give us some pointers on how to talk to them. And we are kind of forgetting that even though, we might have different priorities in a lot of different ways, we're all still people, and you can talk to people. It's okay. So that's been something that I think we've seen. I don't know where this idea came from, that Gen Z is so different that we're not capable of working with them and saying, hey, what is Gen Z good at, and what can they bring to our church and our community?
Well, and I would say just that divide alone of communication leads to deconstruction, right? Because they're not if we're not trying to have conversations with them, theological conversations with them, how Scripture applies to life and all aspects of it, then yeah, they're gonna see kind of what we're saying to other audiences, and then also kind of say like, well, that doesn't apply to me, or that like, and they're just gonna start asking all these questions that are very fair, and gonna start deconstructing on their own.
I was kind of thinking as we were chatting here is like thinking of the idea, like how are we empowering the next generation? And we talked about a little bit about like kind of giving them like token tasks or like intern level tasks. But I think like as we think about we want to empower the next generation, we have to realize that it's actually going to influence and change what we already have, and that I think is maybe some of the tension, because it's like we want to get Gen Z involved, but the involving is going to change things, and I think that's probably maybe where some of the tension is going to like, you know, we want the young people involved, but we want people to be involved at exactly what we're doing now.
Well, there's a hesitation, right? Oftentimes when we hear that question, well, we want to get younger, what they're really saying is we want younger
We want
bodies
young people.
to come
That's
in
what they mean.
to come and assimilate
Yeah.
to us and who we
Right,
are right
exactly.
now as Gen X, boomers,
Yeah.
et cetera. And that's a very hard line that you're going to see a lot of tension, because you're exactly right?
And one day I'm going to do the same thing,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'll try not to, but
Well, I think it's comfortable. What I'm wondering in all of this is it's almost like we've moved into a topic of like, is the younger I don't even know if this is going to make sense, so y'all can cut this out if it doesn't. Is the younger generation helping the church to deconstruct who they are, right? Like, is that more of an interesting conversation that we're moving into? Because it's like the younger generations are coming in, and it's like, they're asking for a different kind of church. They're asking, I mean, one of the things Angel and I go out and preach on sermon called For the Next Generation. What does it look like to be a church for the next generation? And we talk about, we kind of created it together, but we have our own different spins on it. But one of the things that we talk about is like, okay, so if they're dealing with all of these big things, all of these, anxiety and, mental health crisis, and also like the world of the internet and all these different things, along with the normal teenage things, then are we giving them a faith that can withstand all of these things? And the reality is that we're not. And so they can't, I guess I worry, and kind of to your point too, is like, I'm not even sure we're giving them a faith to deconstruct, because I'm not sure that we're really giving them a faith that they can really like latch onto to carry them through all of the seasons of life and those things. If we're not, okay, I'm a kids pastor at heart. If we're not starting true discipleship until confirmation or at 12 or whatever, then like we've missed out on an entire like foundations of faith through all of these different things. If we have parents who are deconstructing and they're saying, hey, these are the things that we're concerned about, and the church isn't listening to them, then like we've missed it. We've lost it. And like, unfortunately, the kids are going to lose out on it. And I think that's a more sobering, disheartening conversation to have, because we have to start taking this seriously, or else we'll miss out. We'll continue to miss out on younger generations, and we'll continue to, keep them from a faith that has sustained all of us around this table, plus and maybe any of the listeners too.
I mean, when you're talking about the kids out there too, that doesn't mean on a Sunday morning you just give them a coloring sheet of Zacchaeus in a tree, because that is the one you see all the time, and say
Noah's Ark.
And Noah's Ark, absolutely. Those are the two. Those are the only two stories that matter from what I've seen.
Come on, I'm the kids pastor here, and also, and also,
The door's back there.
yeah. Also, what is it? No, not Noah's Ark. The
lambs, maybe?
No, what happens at Christmas?
Yeah.
What happens
Nativity?
at
Yeah.
Jeez, what happens at Christmas?
Yeah.
Santa!
Man.
Santa!
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, baby Jesus in the
Sure,
with all
yeah,
the animals.
that whole
Anyways,
thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
for
all.
sure.
I'm
Okay.
done. I'm out.
That's fine.
Drop your
Okay.
favorite.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just to track again. There's been a Matilda and now an Elf reference.
Yes.
We're tracking
Yeah.
these as we go.
Drop your favorite
Yes.
coloring page, biblical coloring
Yes.
page in the
Yes,
comments.
exactly.
In the comments below, drop your favorite coloring kids Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Bible story.
I think for the longest time we've treated the youngest population in our churches, which is now our Gen Alpha, as they are, it's something that we just need to keep track of them. Don't lose the kids. so that the parents can attend church and they can do their thing. And there's no real thought to what discipling that age means. We have been so focused on just keeping them entertained. Let's put on a movie. Let's do something. Let's go play outside. That we're not willing to treat our youngest people as actual parts and people that have anything to give back to the church itself.
Just to kind of piggyback off of this, because it still drives me nuts to this day. Yeah. In seminary, I took a class on Next Gen. And so I was curious to see like what it would have to offer, simply because that's always been a calling and a passion of mine. And they basically stopped at millennials, which infuriated me to no end, because what is that communicating to pastors, right? Like, they don't matter. Also, I would argue
Or we don't know how to talk to them. We don't care about
and
it.
I would argue that, like, from a financial standpoint, it's like, well, let's talk to the ones that are old enough to give to us, right? If we want to get down to the nitty gritty, right? And so to this day, like, you continue to see that lack of leadership in knowing, hey, we need to be very intentional about discipling even at these ages.
Well, that was a really cool thing that Mark and Melissa did really well at the conference that you guys did last fall. Melissa in the afternoon did the Gen Alpha presentation, which like I think a lot of us were like, oh, this is kind of weird that we're talking about Gen Alpha. But then like she put a poster for every year that represents Gen Alpha, and then you're like, holy crap, like Gen Alpha is almost gone. Like they're almost like in our youth ministry. So so the common sense of every pastor that was in that room was like, how do we make up for the lost time that we've already missed and still capitalize on like a couple years that we have left of meaningful ministry with them before they leave our kid spaces?
You talk to pastors,
Also-
they're still millennials. Like, that's what they are. They're millennials.
Yeah, exactly.
The babies are millennials.
Correct.
That's my favorite line when I'm preaching. I say, y'all think millennials are the youngins. Like, we're having the babies now.
Yeah.
Like, we're not there. One of the things that... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't. You're good. You're good.
Yeah, well, and now I've lost my train of thought.
This
So
is great. Yeah.
We're gonna...
Thanks for coming to the
move on-
deconstruction.
Oh, no, okay, so yeah.
we're good.
Deconstruction. So one of the things that Melissa brought out in that, we had one poster for every year, and we had to put up life events,
Crazy.
Well, there was
insane.
there was like a mass shooting almost every year, right? School shooting, mass shooting, something like that. And it I don't know, for me it makes me think too, like, easy ways to win with families, especially those who are fearful or who have deconstructed or are cautious, or whatever word you want to use, is like, I think one of the easiest ways that we can meet families who have deconstructed is to like have a space that meets their values, right? So safety is a huge thing.
Yep.
Let's see. I can't even. I'm just thinking of safety right now, right? Like, let's make sure our space is safe, so that families who have deconstructed, those who are like critical of the church in a really good way, can look at it and be like, oh, they're thinking about things that are important to our generation too.
Yeah, it's, I mean, to that point as well, how are young people that have been through all these shootings, that deal with safety all the time, and they're always scared. Like, I had to have a conversation with my Gen Alpha kid when he first went to kindergarten about all of this, and that's, I never had that conversation growing up. And how is that age, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, how is that age supposed to feel when we think of people that attend church and see videos and hear things from people from church that are touting how important Second Amendment rights are? Again, not that that's not important necessarily, but the idea that like that is so important to us, and that what they're living through is horrifying.
Yeah. I'd be interested just to hear your guy, like, so I think it's been very interesting to talk about, like, here are some of the things we're thinking about, here are some of the things that are going on. Like, this is our thought on deconstruction. One of the things that I have found to be very healing for those in our audience that are maybe listening is, like, they're interested in potentially dipping a toe back into church, right? They're interested in maybe giving faith the second try, and not being certain of what they believe and what they know. And so we do this. We kind of make this a common practice for the four of us, but what is, like, I think people find commonality in sharing stories and like being like, I'm not alone in this. So I think all of those are really interesting things to name in terms of like what people are looking for and what the church as a whole is trying to do. But have you guys personally had experiences with deconstruction? Like, how and maybe if you have had them, or what they've been like, how has that helped you provide yourself with more empathy as a pastor connecting to those in those spaces, whether it's as a parent or just as someone that was once young and growing, like what have been some of the things personally, experientially, that you've had to go through deconstruction wise, and if you can, then connect it out. It's like, how does that play into your ministry? And we can answer that too if you guys. It doesn't just have to be these guys.
Yeah, so I grew up non-denom, kind of conservative. For most, I even went to like a Bible college in my college years, and so for me, there was always this tension of how to interpret Scripture, and so there was always like something inside me that kind of questioned, but I was always scared to ask some of those questions like out loud, and so that played into it. And so I had this very conservative Bible college experience, then found my way into Methodism, which was like a whole new world of like, hey, there's other ways to think. And that was, because for 20 some years of my life, I had this very embedded theology compared to deliberate, right? Like I wasn't really getting in there and dipping my toes into like asking those hard questions aloud and having conversations about them. And so there was this constant fear and risk of, if I ask these questions, I will be, in essence, excommunicated from this community, right? And so after getting into Methodism and kind of learning new views and thoughts, eventually ended up in seminary, which was very fun because I had conservative Bible college and then a fairly progressive graduate.
Yeah, real whiplash.
Yeah, and so like the very first book I read, like in a couple of sentences tried to like undo all the embedded theology that I had on views on Scripture, and and so it was a neat experience. But at the end of the day, what it created for me was what Danny was kind of leaning into, was it created a safer space for empathy in asking questions. And a pastor I used to work with, he probably stole this from somebody else, but he had this line that continues to just kind of impact me as how I lead as a pastor as well, where he said something along the lines of, I'd rather live a life of humble questioning than arrogant assurance. And I would say a lot of
preach.
I would say a lot of Christians in certain circles, they'd rather be right than biblical almost. And so that's where, as I lead, I always try and create a safe space to be like, hey, if you want to ask questions or difficult questions, like there's nothing that's off topic or uncomfortable. And so I try and start from a place of curiosity over anything else. And I think that's kind of been very formative for me to have those questions to be asked. And then also just life in general, right? Like to open up a little bit, like I went through my fair share of hardships, went through a divorce, and that, in certain circles is like really, ooh, you're not a leader now, you're not capable, and all that fun stuff. And so to be on that outside in certain circles created a stronger sense of empathy for anybody that might have been hurt by the church or frustrated or just really angry and broken because of the church, right? And to create a space where it's safe, and not only that, but just say like, hey, I'm sorry. Right? Like I hear your experience and that super sucks. And I can't change that for you, but I hope to create a space where you don't have to feel that again. So when it comes to me as a pastor, those are the types of spaces that I try and create to make it possible for somebody that might want to dip their toe back into church feel a part of.
I think so. I was going through like deconstruction, and I was taking like a big break from the church from about the year like 2020 through 2021. So up until I moved to St. Louis and I started working at the Well, I was a social worker. That's so many of the people I graduated undergrad with, like the ones who like really were like cared deeply, but then deconstructed, and then a lot of us ended up in social work. And so I was doing that while deconstructing. And I almost wonder if there's like almost a justice aspect approach to kidsmen. Because I was thinking about like on Facebook, you see recently like the father, this umbrella, the mother, the smaller umbrella, the child, the smallest umbrella. And all the like scripture passages like all in a row that have all been exploited. Like wives obey your husbands, slaves obey your masters, but we haven't really addressed kids obey your parents. In the like and as a social worker, like seeing that exploited over and over and over again. So if we're talking about the approach to next gen and like giving them a voice and giving them like their own right and autonomy almost, agency, like there are some times when kids should not have this thought that I should always obey what every adult tells me, because that really messes things up and it really puts kids in dangerous situations, I think. And so like, and there's a million jumping off points from here, I'm afraid, but I was what are your any thoughts? Wait, no, Danny already asked a question. We're talking about deconstruction. But what I'm saying is like, that's something as I was deconstructing, I really thought about and noticed that like, I don't know if we've really like thought about it in that way. Is like, we actually need to be taking kids more seriously and not just like molding them to obey.
I have the mic, so I'm going.
Go.
Yeah, all right.
Do it.
Okay, so a couple of thoughts on that is there is a big push right now in like the marriage circles, and I think part of this is coming from it's a shared mental load between the two partners, right? And so I think that automatically works against this dad over of umbrella under the mom under the like that kind
And
of thing.
of course that's a straight relationship.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yes. And so let's see. Let me get my thoughts together. So there's that, which I think is already pushing against that culture of there being a hierarchical experience in that. I also think there's this huge narrative that's coming through of valuing, this comes out of like the gentle parenting realm of things, where it's like, actually, we're going to honor your feelings. We're going to honor who you are. We're going to help you process through those things because we know that you are just a little kid who is trying to process through all these big things, right? And then you have like the whole brain child who says, who's looking at, that whole process is looking at them as a whole person. And so I think in some circles, there's already this push that's going against that narrative. But I also think you have to be in the right circles to see those things, right? I mean, Angel, you've talked about how like when you were in your non-denom world, it was like, I mean, anybody who pushed against that realm, they were out. Right? It's like, how dare you? And, if that's not what we believe in, that's that. So I'm hopeful that for those who are interested in deconstructing, that there are some narratives that are actually coming from outside of the church that I hope will help to influence the church and those leading the church and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about there is, as we've seen from a lot of the studies that that Barna and McCrindle and have talked about with generations, one thing that seems to be going down is the idea of absolute truth. The idea that if a parent or someone tells you something, it is always 100% factual, always 100% accurate. The idea of that has diminished, and there are times when our kids we have to tell kids like, no, that is fire, do not touch that fire, where obedience is important, obviously. My 4-year-old struggles with that exact thing, where it's like, that stove is hot, it will burn you, and he's like, nope. So for sure, I think there's still the obedience in some ways I think is important, but yeah, I think allowing our kids to ask those questions and to think about what is true and how to interpret truth and what is valuable in the world, I think is increasingly more important.
Yeah, and you're starting to see more of a trend, especially with Gen Alpha, right? One of the things that we keep hearing is the concept of digital citizenship. Was a term I've heard at some of the conferences.
Natives,
digital, yeah. And so with them growing up with the internet from the moment, I mean, my 4-year-old knows how to navigate an iPad like nobody's business already. And so with just that fire hose of information, I think it's the church's responsibility to come alongside it. Like those things, as Josh was saying, like the poster boards, like it's not that anymore. It's more so how do we go about things. It's like the higher mentality of well, how do we think, or what's helpful to think, and what questions are helpful to ask, and those sorts of things. And you're starting, like as Mona was saying, you're starting to see some pushback, and it's in the data too of what was the Gallup poll that said when it comes to institutional trust, the church is just doing slightly better than politicians by tenths of a point. Like it's like on a 1 to 10 scale,
But
it's
we
like
still got those tenths of the point,
yeah.
babies.
I think we were like 4.8. Yeah,
right.
politicians were like a 4.6,
Yeah.
4.5. I think the church was like a
It's-
4.8
yeah.
in trust.
Yeah. It's been a rough couple decades.
Yeah, so,
for sure.
Decades is the problem word there.
Yeah.
But it's that notion, like some of those systems and systemic problems that the church has created, like that's why you're seeing some of this deconstruction, right? Like that's why they have seen those things. They have seen the harm that it's been causing, and they're trying to move away from it. We could have a whole conversation about purity culture and the damage that it did, to so many, especially women. But man, like it's such a different landscape now that this is where, as church leaders, we all need to step up and create those spaces where we can have those conversations more openly, and to be able to say like, well, yeah, like that was taught for a certain amount of time. What are your thoughts? Who does that hurt? Who does that help? Who does, who gets exploited in this? Yeah, those sorts of things all kind of come into play to be able to say, how do we have a healthier, more life-giving church community as a whole, by asking those questions.
So I'm going to kind of meld the two questions here, to go back to your question about like, have you deconstructed some of whatever. I grew up in a very Republican family. We were the county seat, and so it was, that was that. And I remember, it was fine. I mean, right. It was all fine. I interned for, CIY, and remember now I know there were only men who were speaking there. And I was like, huh. At the time I was like, huh, that's interesting.
That's just how they do it.
Yeah, that's how they do it. Yeah. There were some other things I was like, I don't know about that. And then I went to seminary, and I had a female pastor growing up in that, right? But I went to seminary again. Angel and I went to the same progressive seminary, and I was like, oh, feminist, what is this? Liberation theology. Oh, that's why I didn't like any of those things. But I could never name the thing, right? Because it was so deeply ingrained in the culture that I grew up in, right? My family isn't bad. The community they grew up in wasn't bad or any of those things. But now as a married person, as a mom, as a person who's now we just attend church because I work here, right? So I'm not appointed to a church. We just now attend. And anyways, I'm just seeing so much of the the systems being built towards the family that you talked about, right? Dad, mom, kid, in those different ways. And I think that, I just suggested to our children's ministry at the church that I attend, I'm like, I would love to see more dads involved in, or more men involved in children's ministry, right? Like there's this, by only including moms on, email lists, right? By only having one, what's that called? Like emergency contact, and not having multiple contacts, right? I mean, that puts the primary parent, the preferred parent, in most cases, that is the mom in traditional hetero marriages. It puts them as the person who carries everything, and we miss out on a generation of young people seeing more than just the women serving in children's ministry, or having any authority, except for when it comes down to, we still look at the hierarchy of things and that. So I think my deconstruction has come in through, and even talking with my mom about some things, she's like, just tell your kid no. And I'm like, no, Mom, we honor his feelings, right? We talk about these things, so that I'm even going through my own deconstruction as a parent and as a wife and as a spouse in a lot of different ways. So I think I'm in the middle of that, and part of that is because I came out of a very conservative culture that's masked almost. Because it's not, I didn't grow up nom to nom, right? So anyways, that's my experience. Yeah.
Well, and if you look at some of the most recent data too, the kind of that standard nuclear family that almost all church events are planned towards is like just a little bit above 50% right now, which is the lowest that number has ever been. And the number of times that I've talked with churches and I'm like, hey, how are you thinking about single parents? Are you exclusively using the word parents? Because grandparents, guardians, all apply in this too. That's been an interesting, I think, transition for me as I've thought about that too, and what it is at the Methodist Church now, and where we sit on homosexuality, and like that leads to some different conversation, different language that needs to happen,
which is probably really not probably. It is an important conversation that we like. That changes everything, which is really exciting that we can have those conversations.
Safe gatherings.
Safe gatherings.
Totally prepared. Absolutely, with safe gatherings. But yeah, like it's. I love to see that when our churches finally kind of grasp that idea that, hey, mom, dad, and 2 kids or 3 kids is that it's still technically the norm, but like you give it a couple years at best at this point. So things are radically shifting. And that's the world that I grew up in. Answer your question too. When it came to my upbringing, I had a mom, dad, 4 brothers and sisters. Way too many people. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. I love my siblings, but like, oh my gosh, mass anarchy all the time. But grew up in a very traditional household where, if I think I was constantly struggling with the idea of sin and death and hell all the time, to where it was.
We love that.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and I am not a pastor like these two. So I'll give the normal person perspective here. So I didn't have college and everything to go through there for me, but grew up where in the middle of the night, if I'd hear a loud noise, it'd be like, oh, that's the trumpets. That's the trumpets. Time to pray. Pray real quick. So you laugh, but it was real terror and fear as a child.
I started panic attacks around age 7.
Yeah.
Because of the concept of eternity.
Yep.
Like a little bit of, am I going to go to heaven? Like, that's so young. Like, I know 7-year-olds now.
Yeah.
And, like, if I think about it too hard, I'll just weep. So,
yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I was probably under 10 years old when that started for me, and that lasted for way too long. But grew up in that world where, parents went through all of my music. Everything was curated. It got thrown away. I was yelled at. Like, this is the world that I lived in.
Okay, who performed at the Super Bowl? And you're like, Usher?
I mean, I know Usher. Yeah. I know Usher.
No, but we were all at his house.
I'm still cool, guys.
Yeah, so cool.
I know.
No, your wife and I were
Usher,
literally
right?
like singing along to it, and you're like, I don't know. You couldn't like participate. Yeah.
I know. Oh, yeah. Ignition. I've heard that word in there. Yeah. 100%. But yeah, right. I know it's a remix. What's the original? I have no idea. But this is the world that I lived in growing up, and really, I think, really struggled when I was really involved in church still, but I was very much told like this is all correct. All of these other people are very incorrect. This is the one true faith, and even some of the derivatives. I grew up Lutheran. Some of the derivatives of that. I'm sorry, your family being in that Lutheran sphere you were heathens. Yeah. So congratulations.
I married into a very ELCA family.
Yes.
So and he grew up Missouri Synod.
Yes.
So yes.
So
opposite sides.
So it was super fun. But yeah, right.
Wait, are you guys married?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No.
Why did you say
No.
that? Or-
No,
Yes, Angel
we're
and I,
just
yes,
we're
very
the same.
Okay, sorry. I thought that makes sense why I didn't grasp that.
Yeah.
No. We are the same person.
That's
though.
fair.
Yeah.
Yes. No, my wife she's a pharmacist. She's incredible. She's actually the primary breadwinner in our family. Go figure, pharmacist ministry. Like it's
Makes
a
no
little,
sense.
little different hierarchy there, right? But grew up in that world where I was really involved in church, but the second that I went to college, it mostly all went away because I was not being pushed that direction. So I'm assuming this sounds familiar for a lot of people. But yeah, grew up in that sphere where eventually I kind of had to find my faith. ended up moving to Mississippi, and Lutheran is the only Lutheran Missouri Synod is the only one true Christianity, and so yes, thank you, I really appreciate that. So Father, Son, Holy, all the things. But in Mississippi, Lutheran not really a thing. Ended up finding the Methodist church down there, and was I was mostly a heathen at that point when I found that church. But the first time I went, there was a woman who was preaching on stage, and it took a couple weeks, which is for me now an embarrassing amount of time, before I was like, why is this a problem? But so it's that idea of women in leadership, because I was thinking, okay, my wife is in school to be a pharmacist whose people's lives are on the line, but like she can't preach on a Sunday morning. That's insane. So that kind of started that journey for me, where I started looking at some of my past beliefs and what was kind of preached into me over and over and over again growing up, where there's still some good stuff there, but the idea of, being in Methodism, and the idea of grace, and that I don't need to be afraid that the world is going to end every 3 seconds, and I better get on my knees and pray the second I hear a loud noise, was a game changer for me, and just knowing that we're in this place where we care for each other, and the ideas of Methodism struck an incredible chord with me and led me to where I am now, which it's a little bit of a journey to get here, but yeah, I'm here. So
I was also baptized in Missouri Synod Lutheran.
Fantastic.
So you weren't kidding with this. This was like,
oh no, for sure.
That's like back of the noggin.
I was gonna say, you end every service with that, baby.
Yeah,
that's good.
One thing that I heard somewhat as a comment thread, and I actually just had this conversation with a family member friend of ours around multicultural conversations in the church, and they were like wanting their church to be more multicultural, and that's more than having, if you're a white church, a black pastor, right? Like there's work that has to be done in that. And the thing that I kept going back to in that conversation was like, they kept using the term like normal or correct or whatever. And I was like, well, this is normal to you, right?
Yeah.
And I think a common thread I've heard is like in some of our experiences as millennials or Gen Z in this, like there was an access by someone along the way to challenge what was normal to them, to allow our normal to seep into that. And I think that's a little bit of like what I think our challenge might be is understanding we actually aren't doing it right. Like that's the fear, right? Like we're not normal by any stretch of the imagination, but like allowing other people to seep in there. So I think we're around an hour, and we
are at an hour.
Yeah, we want to try to land this plane. So I thought what might be interesting would be to just share. It could be on anything, real blue sky energy. But like, what kind of your final takeaway, word of wisdom nugget might be, if you have anything for everybody. You want to take us out?
Oh, yeah, you do.
The thinking specifically about what this conversation we just had, and the language I started when I was specifically thinking about children and youth in churches is like for a long time, and I think a lot of churches still do this. They treat young people like means to an end instead of as an end in themselves, right? And so I think like there's a lot of wisdom in going back and re-examining what our churches do or what our specific ministries or whatever, and asking ourselves that question. Like, are we treating people, but specifically young people in this case, as a means to an end to produce a return customer so we can get their tithe and keep our lights on? Or are we treating them as ends in themselves, as created beings in the image of God that we want to see flourish and grow? And so that's something that's been helpful for me. In my previous church, I worked in children's ministry for a year, and it was great. And I tried to kind of always lead with that question. And I think it was very, very helpful for me and for the leaders that I was working with, and kind of reframing that question and that work. So, so that's my word of wisdom. Make sure we're treating our young people as ends in themselves, not as means to an end. I don't know which way we want to go here.
Yeah, anyone popcorn.
Oh, we're gonna popcorn it. Yeah. Kyle.
Oh, okay. Oh,
we're literally
hi,
popcorning.
My name's
it.
Kyle.
Love it.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really interesting. Like, I liked the comment that we were making about like ending the ideology of like the hierarchical family. That word didn't come out right. But like Elena and I talked about this. Like, you know, I'm the dad expert in the room because I have 10 weeks of it. But like one thing that we talked about, like, you know, through Elena's pregnancy, that was really interesting was like, I think that you have to start looking at families, and this has been helpful for us as, you know, adults, you know, and having siblings that are adults and still having a family relationship with our parents too. Like, we have to view families more as like a communicative circle, you know, and I think that can be helpful for kids also. Like, there is no higher part of the circle. It's all one ending conversation point, you know. So like, you know, our kids should have the same weight in a family relationship as, you know, the parents do as well, you know. So the things that they say and things that they're feeling should matter, and when we put them in a hierarchy form, then, you know, then the kids at the bottom, and then nothing that they say ever matters, you know. But the more that we can value their voices, obviously, you know, the stove is hot, like, you still have to be able to, like, you know, parent your kids, but, you know, at the same time, you know, they have real feelings that I think that we, even being mindful of it, still have a hard time putting value on it, because we're like, oh, well, they're just kids. It's the easy thing to say. But, you know, their voices matter so much more, and I think that we need to just continue to shine a light onto that, and, you know, change the norm on that.
Yeah, actually, sitting in church yesterday, I was talking to your dad, and like that was one of the things I appreciated was like
And he just bashed on me. Probably.
No, man, he was like talking about you as if you were this, and I think you are like this well of wisdom. Like, he was like really complimentary of you,
John.
and like, well, a lot of like parents don't do that, right? And so like they look at you like as their child and love you in that regard, but like there was a value add spiritually and wisdom wise, and I was like, that's like great parenting by someone. To engage that. So if he listens to the pod, like,
he
it was
definitely
actually really,
does,
really good.
and he's gonna hear this. This is cool. So
it was like what struck me.
Oh yeah, he does.
That's so
Nice.
cute.
He's my number one fan. Josh.
Yeah, so I would just encourage our churches, our individuals to be thinking about what needs to change about our space, what needs to change about the people that are in charge in our churches to actually include young people as part of the church. So who in leadership needs to step aside? What job has someone at the church been doing for the last 20 years that, hey, I can walk alongside an 8-year-old, 12-year-old, whatever, and have them be a part of this. Give them the opportunities for a seat at the table in easy ways, in difficult ways, whatever that is. So just thinking, if we do want to get younger, as a lot of our churches say that we do.
I appreciated the if we want to get
If
younger.
we want to get younger.
That's a
Some
good
churches
point.
don't.
Yeah.
Some churches don't, and that's their choice. But if we do want to get younger, what does that look like? Where can we live out that reality in the real world, instead of just giving them, the opportunity for, recording something and streaming something on YouTube or Twitch or, all the different opportunities that are already out there? Where can we give them those opportunities in the church to really be a part of the actual church and not just in service of the church to, increase our numbers so they look really good on a report? Oh, let's see. We'll just keep going down the line. Yeah.
Lame.
Angel doesn't.
It's
I think you did a
fine.
great job.
Yes.
Really, thank you.
I mean, she is the boss.
Yeah,
So
I am the boss here. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, so I've got two thoughts. One is if you are at a church and they are not, as a young person, right, or as a family who has young people, or as an advocate of an older generation, like, use your voice to ask for space, right? Use your voice to advocate for there to be safe space for your kids to grow up and not have to deconstruct a faith. Like, I think that if my hope would be that if there is a group of families who rise up and say, hey, we want more for our kids, then surely somebody would listen to them. I would hope so, right? The other thing I would say is for our churches is to make space for your kids to have a faith that will matter and that will make a difference in their life, to like actually take it seriously and give them, I have the imagery of the wise men who built their house upon a sand and was it rock? Yeah, it's fine. I'm a pastor. Yeah, that
Build
sounds.
your house
yeah.
upon the rock.
Yeah.
Wise men
Building. Yes, I love it. I'm just thinking, like, what kind of faith can we give them to where it's a rock, and where they don't have to deconstruct it, but it is a rock that will get them through every season of life, the good and the hard. Can we take that part seriously, please?
Yeah.
I dig that.
Danny.
Actual popcorn.
Popcorn.
Actual popcorn? How dare you?
Yeah, I guess.
Popcorn elitist over here.
Whoa.
Whoa.
What do you have to say?
JT's a big fan of elitism politics.
Our apologies to the popcorn community.
Big popcorn.
You big popcorn.
Yeah, this podcast episode is just like an apology tour of like lots of things.
An apology.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, like, I'm just psyched people want to have this conversation, that are interested in having it. I would argue, and this is not right by any stretch of the imagination, but I think if your church, I would even not make it an if you want to grow younger. I think if you're not interested in growing younger as a church or growing more diverse, I think you are more of a social club than a church. I think that's like probably true. I mean, I have a hard time believing you're doing the work that Jesus calls you to do if you're like not interested in doing those things. But I also like think that churches like the Well that look a certain way are not the ones doing it right. And so there's this idea that like the new church, we're 3 years old, or the young church or the large churches, they're the ones doing it right, so we have to copy them. I think they've found what works for them. And I think figuring out like how your church can be interested in the work of Jesus, which is creating more seats than that you take away and making more diversity in gender and ethnicity and sexuality and all of those sorts, and in age as well. I don't know. I dream of a church that like problems of the world won't go away. Deconstruction won't ultimately forever go away. But I love this idea of like giving new generations coming up something that will be able to withstand the test of all of those things that come along. And like I think about for my kids, my oldest son who's 10 is like just not interested really in religion or going to church, and his younger sister is very interested in telling everyone that, which I think is very funny. She's like, Knox doesn't believe in God. Do you know that? And it's like, you just met this person.
It's very younger sibling vibe.
Yeah.
Like, that fits.
Yeah, right. She loves doing that. But what I appreciate is like I want him to come to this on his own. Like being a pastor's kid and being forced to be religious is not interesting to me at all. I have no appetite for like making my kids do what I do. I deeply believe in it, and I hope that they find a place that gets them there. But they don't have to go here because it's what I do for a living, right? Like I want them to be a part of it. And I wonder then how we do that for our kids as parents in church, not just as pastors and staff. It's like, how do we make this a thing our kids want to go to, can participate in, ask questions? I think the ecosystems we create will make more diverse down the road in our churches and our families and our ecosystems, our friend groups. Like, I think it has to start with us in that. So, yeah.
Can I go next? Because
Sadie.
I don't want to be the last one because mine's kind of like
Sadie.
kind of weird. Whatever.
Yours will be more serious.
Yeah.
I'll try and make
Well,
it. Yeah.
what I mean is like I don't know. I'm just gonna say what I'm gonna say and stop prefacing it. But if I like my final thoughts, I guess is like I think that we've made the nuclear family an idol, and I think that we would do a good service to like work on deconstructing that perhaps, because like I just don't think that, and I need everyone to know that I'm not a parent, so like I don't have that experience.
I was going to make a bad dad joke, and I decided not to.
Anyways, I'm not a parent, but I do think that we've made the nuclear family an idol. So as someone without kids, not married, I do actually think a lot about what I want my future family to look like. But I'm really interested in the idea of like exposing my children to as many like trusted adults as possible. And because it's going to like lighten the burden on the parents, but also just like hopefully just expose them to different types of people, types of relationships. And just like, I personally want to live on a commune with my closest friends. Like that's my current goal.
Like the early church,
Like
you're
the
saying?
early church is what I'm saying.
Desert monks and fathers.
Woo!
Desert mothers and I said monks.
You said monks. You said monks.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking, what?
Monks.
Yeah, this was a choice. Okay,
Yeah.
this wasn't a.
But that's the type of thing that I'm interested in. And then my other random thing was like, if you need an idea of like something tangible to like try, like with the kid to give them like some sort of agency, is like, I think it's great if you're playing, for example, you're playing school, have the kid be the teacher, have you be the student. An example of like of role reversal for them to understand that like they can like, or have them, if we're playing Simon Says, they're in charge, you're doing it. So just like things that you can be incorporated through play, but teach kids that like that they can stand up to adults if they need to. So maybe just a fun like something to think about, or if you want to try out, you know. So that's what I got.
Well, I appreciate that you brought that up simply because I would say the young adult single demographic is invisible to a lot of churches. So you bringing that up only like reinforces that, because yeah, most of the times it's still that mentality of nuclear family over and over again. And I would say if you look at generational studies, like people are staying single longer and having kids way later. So like the church really as a whole needs to change its mind on that. And when you're talking Gen Zs as old as 27, 28, 29, like those things have to be considered. And how do we create space for anybody that falls into that category right there? Because oftentimes they're just completely invisible, unless you want to be in a singles group that is basically just a couples, future couples group. Yeah. So,
Well, and Kyle was just saying that.
Thanks for coming to the
Kyle was just saying that.
Hold on. Nope.
Single people should have less voting power than people with kids.
Nope.
That's what he said, right?
After
we
we
heard that.
After we wrapped, I was going to give you credit for this is the first podcast episode we've ever done to not make one of those jokes, and you still did it.
so close.
Yeah.
We could always cut it before.
We could.
No,
Yeah.
no, because no cuts.
We
Plus,
don't-
Angel wasn't. I interrupted Angel to make this joke, so Angel's got to finish.
Sure. Finish your point. Yeah.
It was giving really big like Deadpool vibes with. Oh, has anybody seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Johnny
totally.
Storm,
I have fun. So.
like
Same.
Human Torch
Yeah.
vibes. Anyway, now for serious. So one of the things about being in my position is I nerd out to data a lot, and this has kind of been one of the things that has really impassioned me and emboldened me to kind of speak out and create space like this as often as I can. In the state of Missouri, when it comes to United Methodist churches, we have like roughly just north of 500 some churches. We take year-end numbers across the board. Some of those break down into demographics. The United Methodist Church in Missouri, when it comes to the 12 to 18-year-olds and faith development and kind of, in essence, members, right? About half of our churches don't have a single 12 to 18-year-old here in Missouri. When it comes to nationally, I was able to get the numbers nationally as well. It's very easy to get. But it took me 4 months.
He didn't make anybody mad.
No, just stirring up trouble. And so,
Good trouble.
but the reality is that it's worse, right? So what are our churches doing to, as we've talked about here today, create those spaces, create those opportunities to have these conversations, to be a little bit more intentional about people that aren't in our churches as a whole, right? Like especially those that are deconstructing out there, and what can we do to create better conversations as opposed to just talking at somebody, because that's oftentimes our go-to. It's our tried and true method of let me just talk at you and teach you and do this, as opposed to being just a good listener and caring for somebody and not necessarily having an agenda to bring them to faith, but just to see who and how they are as an individual as is. So I would really, whether you are a church leader, I'd encourage you to have those conversations. If you are somebody that's wanting to maybe dip your toe back into the church world, I would say, I would echo what Mona said of ask those questions. You have every right to kind of ask those questions of the pastor and leadership of like, hey, how do you see this? Or, that's going to be your best avenue to know like, hey, this might be somewhere safe where I can land as I'm trying to figure things out, either for myself or even for my kids. So those would be my kind of 2 points of wisdom of just at the end of the day, my heart, just goes out to the next generation, and I continue to try and advocate for them the best that I can with what I can. And at the end of the day, like as Danny said so well, like if you're not thinking about the next generation in this, like you're just kind of being a social club at that point.
Or like genuinely thinking about including them, not just for the sake of
Yeah, well, I mean, not only allow them to have a voice, but then act upon it, right? Like a good leader is a good listener. So it's something that we say in our office all the time. And so create that space where you can listen and have that conversation. Create a safe enough space where I'm the same way with my kids, right? Like even though I work in the church world, like I don't want to force this upon them. And we ask questions as opposed to anything else. So I would lean into those things of just creating those spaces as best as you can to listen, to learn, and to act on it also.
Do you want to finish? Sorry, that was really good.
Well, thanks.
It wasn't good. Yeah. No, just can you give the other two categories, kids and young adults in the state of Missouri?
Kids are at about, I want to say 45% of our churches don't have a single kid, which is considered in our circles 0 to 11. And then when it comes to college age, which is 19 to 30, it's 75-ish almost, like 74, 73% of our churches don't have a single 19 to 30-year-old.
That tracks. Yeah.
I mean, and if you were to go around a church, you'd see like there's just this massive divide within that demographic.
Yeah. So that I mean, really, what that translates to is only 25% of our churches even have anyone Gen Z.
Yep.
Within the walls.
Correct, and even stretching into like young millennials.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because I would say Methodist theology lends itself more so to Gen Z and Gen Alpha with the direction that we're moving.
Mm-hmm.
What a teaser for the episode 2 where we're going to have to schedule 6 months from now.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to talk about the Were you going to say something?
No, I was going to
You
wrap
had
up
your microphone like you were getting ready to say.
because I was going to wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, go
Do
ahead.
you want to?
Nope.
All right. Well, so back to the Olympics. Yeah. Arm wrestling would be great. Oh, the slap competition. Yeah. That's a good one.
Power slap? What do they
Yeah,
call that?
something like
dude,
Josh is
that's-
volunteering for his
that's what
country as
yeah,
well.
I don't think
Yeah,
Dana
sounds
White.
like Josh is volunteering.
Dana White should not be involved with the Olympics in general.
No. Well, Josh, Mona, Angel, thank you guys so much for giving us your time today. This has been a lot of fun. Like we've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So thank you guys for checking out the Deconstruction Zone for another time and for sticking with us through a pretty lengthy episode, but I think a really, really important one. You can be sure to check us out on TikTok and on all social platforms. We're back to posting weekly episodes. So Danny, do you want to teach him our outro? This is your thing.
So our outro is we say embrace the journey. That's kind of our tagline, and we will snap at the end of it. So, so with that in mind, we want to encourage our audience to embrace the journey. That was pretty
There
good.
it is. Pretty good.